Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Quite difficult.
We have Valerie and Zoe here. They're in New York. I think you're both in New York, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm in Seattle. Valerie, I forgot to ask you where you were. I'm in Seattle. Where are you tuning in from? Tell us in the chat where you are. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
We'll give people just a few minutes or a little bit of time here to tune in, and then I'll sort of introduce you two, and you can get started.
Oh, we don't see the participants. They're hidden.
No, this is a webinar, Zoe.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. So we have someone from Leavenworth. Where else? Hello, hello. Bless you.
Bless you. Gesundheit.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I know people will continue to tune in. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Lara Hamilton. I have a cookbook shop here in Seattle, Washington that's called Book Larder. And we have just started to do some in-person classes and a very, very few author talks in this sort of pandemic moment we're in. But we are continuing to offer Zoom conversations, which means that we get to have really cool talks like the one that we have happening today, where we are welcoming the authors of these two. Oh, yes. Oh, no, I have them the right way. I thought I had your book upside down, Valerie. Sorry. We have the authors of these two absolutely wonderful books here, Zoe Adjonyoh and Vallery Lomas. Zoe and Valerie, yes, look at that. See, Zoe's got them too. Zoe and Valerie are going to talk. Oh, yes, and so is Valerie. We've all done our jobs today. It's awesome. They are going to talk about their books, interview each other a little bit about baking, about Ghanaian cuisine and West African cuisine. They are going to talk about the holidays and the approaching sort of festive season that gets going really well. I feel like it's like gets going at like Halloween in this country anymore, but and really just goes for months at this point, and we need it, right? It's all good. They're going to talk about the holidays, and of course, they're going to leave lots of time for questions. So if you have a question, please pop those into the little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen so that they're a little easier for us to keep track of. We are recording this conversation, and so if for whatever reason you have to pop off early or you want to share it with friends, it'll be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days, and everyone who registered will get an email letting you know when that's live. And you can support this author talk and what we do at Book Larder by choosing to purchase the books from us if you are so inclined. And thank you to everyone who's already done that. We really appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to pop off here and turn things over to Zoe Adjonyoh and Vallery Lomas.
Woohoo! How are you doing, Valerie, babe?
Hey Zoe. Oh no, I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you this evening, and I'm coming off of a little cold, but I'm really happy to talk to you.
I know I'm coming off of a high in the last few days. It must be, I've been very excited for a week. How that's also quite energetically draining, but I'm so excited to be here. And babe, I'm very excited to get into talking about your book because I love, you know what I love? The first thing that I love about this is your voice and like how joyful your voice is about this subject, because for people that don't know, I don't have any formal culinary training. So like I'm self-taught home cook basically, and baking has like always been a scary prospect to me, like because it's so it seems, you know, baking is such a precise science, and then you have art on top of it, you know. But and so baking can sometimes be an intimidating idea, I think. But when I opened your book and like you've got this wonderful long introduction about your journey, about the baking competition and like your approach to baking and just how your career has been shaped, and it's very, very inspiring. And then the way you break out the sections of it, and it's like, oh yeah, I like how she's done this. It's like, oh, here's buns, here's cookies. It's like, it's all very like easy and accessible, and you have this really lovely, joyful approach to it. So as a newbie to America, I didn't see you on the Great British Baking Show, but I mean, I have been following you for quite a while on Instagram. So could you, I think probably some people might be interested to hear about what your journeys has been like, you know, because you're a former lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I do have a law degree as it happens. I didn't go into law. So we have that in common. But maybe you could tell people about, yeah, about that, jumping out of law and into food and into baking specifically.
Yeah. So no, thank you, Zoe. You know, it's interesting because when I was growing up, I didn't really understand that like food, like working in the food industry was even an option. So as I was like, you know, going through school, and it was always like, am I going to go to medical school or am I going to go to law school? And, you know, at different points in my like educational journey, it was like one or the other. And, you know, at some point I, you know, just due to, you know, I grew up in Louisiana, and there's like a strong French heritage in Louisiana. And, you know, I had a foreign exchange student live at our home from Guadeloupe, which is like a department of France. And it's, you know, it's a country in the Caribbean, but it's technically, you know, it's France, even though it's not the metropole.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, that like inspired me to learn French, and that's how I ended up in France. And then I was just kind of introduced to this whole other world of food and pastry that was so different from where I grew up, but so ingrained and just as important to the culture of where I was. So I think, you know, being from Louisiana and then spending, you know, quite a bit of time in France during my formative years, I call college and law school my formative years. Yes. I'm like, that's when I grew up. Yeah, and so I discovered I had this passion for food, and I discovered this while I was in law school, because you know I went to law school right after college, and from there on, it was just like a hobby that I was like really passionate about. And it took me, you know, it took a whole career. Like I was a lawyer for 8 years. During that time, you know, I started a food blog my last year of law school. And I had opened up a macaroon business and a lot of other little things, just always kind of like dipping my toe in, but not ready to like jump all the way in, which is a very scary thing that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to if you've wanted to make like a huge pivot in your life or your career. And competing on the Great American Baking Show, because I ended up being cast while I was, you know, of course, working as a lawyer still. It was like my 7th or 8th year working as a lawyer. And that actually kind of gave me the wherewithal to like think, okay, I think I can make a career out of this, or at least I knew I wanted to try. And that's kind of what empowered me to take that leap and give myself a real shot. And you know, when I made the decision to kind of leave my lawyering life behind and go full speed ahead into the food world, I didn't have gigs lined up. But like I knew that just like the process of me trying to make it, that was the satisfaction that I needed. That's like what I needed to like fulfill myself in that way. So that's like how this book was born, essentially, was from giving myself the space and the time to create it. And for me, that meant, you know, walking away from a job. And at the same time, I was like, you know, I'm blessed. I have a family that's like my safety net. And as they try to tell you this thing where like you can't have holes in your resume, like, oh, if you're a lawyer, you've got a hole in your resume, it's the end of the world. Like you'll never get another job again. those are all like, listen, like you can do whatever, like with whatever you've got, you can work with it. So, yeah, but, so no, thank you, Zoe. And, you know, congratulations, because your book just came out, which is why I think you're on such a high from it, I hope. I saw you like going around the city and hitting up some local bookstores. And of course, you know, thank you to Book Larder for sponsoring this event. And yeah, Zoe, we had a chance also to just kind of like chat freely this past weekend and a few other times recently, which is nice because it was like the first time kind of meeting you in person. So what has your, like, I'm curious, like, how did you end up here in New York? Because this book, it's very much like a love letter to your Ghanaian culture and the cuisine. And, you know, before that, you were living, you know, across the pond. But what brought you here to New York specifically?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Nobody's asked me yet on this on this mission. First of all, I want to say, I just wonder if you don't mind, I'm going to share back on what you said, because what I love about what you said about your particular journey, that is the fact that you said you gave yourself permission, you know, and I think that that's what a lot of people don't do, is give themselves permission to create that space and time to do the thing that they're passionate about. And I think that's been very true in my own journey as well. It's like giving yourself permission to just do the thing you want to do, whether like there's a template for it, whether it already exists or whatever. So, you know, with Ghana Kitchen and with what I do, I have very much built my own kind of lane, you know, like, and how did I end up here? Well, I'm married to a New Yorker. So that's most immediately, I guess, why I'm here. But I have had a love affair with America for like about 15 years. I've been coming to New York over the last 15 years on and off. And I've been living between New York and London for the last 5 years, as I say, since I've been married. And, you know, Sarah and I wanted to put down roots, and, you know, I couldn't keep being 1 foot here, 1 foot there. And we wanted to both be on the same continent to start a family and stuff like that. So we decided to come here. And the reason mostly, I was just saying to Lara before we started talking actually, is my kind of, what, you know, I do something really specific, which is, you know, I'm talking about, writing about and cooking West African food, and very specifically most of the time Ghanaian food. And in the UK, there's quite, I've been doing that for 12 years in the UK. So there's there's a much smaller kind of media outlets and publications. And I've kind of been around the sun a number of times with the same, do you know what I mean? I've featured in so much of the press already and on TV. So there's kind of a limit to my career in the UK, and I've kind of hit that ceiling. So coming to the States made a lot of sense in that respect, because I know that there's the African Americans, like the African diaspora, in the States, is starting to reconnect with its ancestry and its roots. And of course, food is always this great initial tool to do that, right? I mean, that's exactly what my journey has been with this food. It's been a way to connect with my culture and my ancestry, and then share that with other people. So that's why I'm here, is to spread the love of Ghana to the United States. But also, what's great about being here at this moment in time is that I'm not the first, for once. And I was very much like a pioneer, in air quotes, right, in the UK. So that can be a lonely space.
Yeah.
But knowing that there's lots of other chefs here who've already kind of forging that path and having that conversation means that I'm coming in at quite an opportune time, because the lens has been opened a little bit. And so it's really good time for this book to have a revival, because there's, you know, there's more interest now in this type of cuisine. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
No, I love that. And that, I guess, kind of brings me into another thing I wanted us to discuss, because, you know, for me, this was like very much an introductory, not just to Ghanaian cuisine, but West African cuisine, and the spices, and even like the names of things that, you know, I like once I read more into the recipe, I was like, okay, well, I do recognize some of the ingredients and stuff, but even like the name. So I think you do a lot of just teaching us like just the absolute basics and the vocabulary and the ingredients and techniques that are fundamental to Ghanaian cuisine and West African cuisine. And what you said about not having to necessarily be the first, because then you're kind of utilizing all of your energy just on that. Whereas your book is gorgeous, the photography, the layout, everything, it just comes together so beautifully. So could you maybe talk a little bit about about that element that maybe you had to do initially with like a lot of the like the teaching aspects, but also how you kind of balanced just sharing like your authentic relationship really with this cuisine without having to like water it down and spending all of your time kind of like teaching the rest of us about everything.
So I mean, it's also worth for context noting that I was researching this was conceived in like 2012, 2013. I went to Ghana in 2013 to kind of get a more robust understanding of what traditional was, what authentic was, and to have a very, because my relationship growing up with food was my dad was translating through his lens, right, these recipes, and then my mum was translating it again through when he was absent. So it was very specific, to my household, what we were eating, because not necessarily some ingredients were available. So interesting substitutions might have been taking place. So it was really important to me to go back and be like, okay, but what is this before anything else happens to it? But even then, it's like what I learned was it changes all the time. It changes from house to house, village to village, town to town.
Yeah.
And so, it was a big task back then because it was a super niche cuisine I was talking about. And honestly, even like whether I was talking to a new audience who had no relationship with this food, or even talking to second and third generation Ghanaians in the UK and Europe who probably didn't have, who still didn't know very much about the cuisine and probably didn't know the names of certain ingredients or hadn't heard of quite a lot of the ingredients because they knew what they had growing up, right? And that's normally a small repertoire that your mother or your father or your grandmother have, then nobody's like cooking the canon of Ghanaian cuisine at home. So that was an interesting dichotomy, I suppose, is like, how do I explain this to people who kind of know what it is?
Yeah.
And then also explain it to people who have no idea what it is. And that's what was important to me, is for this book to be a tool, a guide, an introduction. So there is a lot of time spent on the ingredients, on the flavors, on the spices. And I really then, on top of that, wanted to show people, give a lens into that tradition and that more authoritative kind of language around what Ghanaian food is or can be, depending on where you are regionally. But also then show, at the time for me, when I came back from that trip, it was really important that I could bring myself to these ingredients as well, So then it was like, oh, but what else could this be? Because there wasn't this long tradition like the French, like the Italians, right, of cookery writing and recipe creation and all of that. There wasn't a culinary art coming out of West Africa at the time. And we're only just starting to see that now. And so I just wanted to have this introduction where people could not be intimidated and have fun. That was the most important thing. Like, I feel like I wanted people to have fun whilst exploring this cuisine in the same way that I had fun exploring the cuisine. And on the subject of like me being authentic, whatever, I can't.
Sorry for that word. I know it's a very loaded word.
I mean, I don't really have any other way of being, this is just who I am in the world. How I move is without any filter and without any, like, I'm just being myself, honestly, all the time. And I think people appreciate that. And I think that comes through when I write and when I talk about this food. It's like, I'm bringing myself to it because it's my relationship with it. And I'm definitely not saying to people, here's everything you need to know about Ghanaian food. It's like, here's some of what you should know, and here's some extra stuff that I've done to explore it and have fun with it, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, just one thing, because you mentioned like the actual writing of the book. Zoe, you are a beautiful writer.
Oh,
And I found it like it was very inviting. So what you said about you wanted it to be kind of fun. I did find that like I felt like invited, and it did feel like it had a level of accessibility to it. But I think your writing style is just beautiful. And is that something that did you know what a great writer you were, or like I'm so serious
wow.
because it's one of the it's like one of the things that I think really makes this book stand out and is really special is how inviting it feels. And I think your writing style has a lot to do with that.
God, that's really, really lovely to hear. Thank you so much. That's very generous. The answer is going to be no, frankly, because I don't. I mean, you know, writing has always been my passion, and like I went to, you know, I had an African dad, so contextually for Africans, that means you're doing law or accounting, whether you like it or not, because we have this history of, you know, the culinary arts just weren't a thing, like, and certainly it wasn't considered. You know, when I was a kid, I couldn't, while I was cooking this kid as a kid, I loved cooking, but I never conceived for a second that this would be some kind of career. Do you know what I mean? But at the back, I was very much like academically minded and books. And so I did law. You know, I came to this really late, having done many other kinds of jobs in the world. But ironically, like the universe did this beautiful twist on me, because, you know, I came in my 30s, I decided I want to go back to my passion, right, which was writing. And so I did like a gateway course, you know, and then I applied for the MA at Goldsmiths University in Creative and Life Writing. And Ghana Kitchen launched at the same time, kind of. And then I was like cooking in order to support myself through the MA. And I was having the best time, because it was like, this is so fun. I'm just cooking and reading and writing, and that's all I'm doing. And I was just having the time of my life. So definitely the fact that I did the MA obviously fed into the fact, obviously my writing improved, and as a consequence of that course, I'm ever grateful for it. And one of my tutors actually, who I thought, at the time, I thought that he didn't think I had a career in writing, because he kept saying to me, because there was a lot of press around Ghana Kitchen at the time I was doing my MA, and he kept saying to me, you know, maybe you should be doing that full time, and maybe there'll be a full circle moment. And then there was a full circle moment where I got to write a cookbook. So yeah. But yes, and coming back to this book, you know, to rewrite the recipes and update the introduction 5 years or 6 years after the original, as a writer and as a cook, having grown over that time, was an extra special treat, because it meant that I could, you know, bring that experience and that knowledge and that growth back to the book, which was really great. And I want to say to you, because I don't want this all to be one way, because you're good at this, you're asking me all the questions. I want to say to you, how did you, because also, I mean, this might be different in the US, and I don't know the landscape necessarily of cookery writing and bakery here, but I know that in the UK, the only Black woman I've seen baking on TV, well, you have Nadia Hussein, who's of colour, and then you have Benjamin Bakes. But is there like a huge long canon here of Black women in bakery? And like, do you feel like, I mean, there's Cheryl Day, right? And I know a few people, but what's that like? Do you feel any pressure to be a Black woman talking about baking? Do you know what I mean? Or like,
Yeah.
how do you approach it specifically from your particular culture, and how have you brought your culture into this topic, into this book?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This is something I think I've grappled with from, you know, being a lawyer, where people tell you like the expectations of like, you are a woman or you are a Black woman, so like don't act like one, in the sense of like, don't bring food to work, or don't, don't like portray yourself in ways that, these very stereotypical ways, like, I don't know, like feeding people, for example, which is interesting because, inherently that's something that brings me a lot of joy. And as a lawyer, because I was a Black woman, I was told that like that would put me in a certain box full of stereotypes, and I should avoid it. So in many ways, it feels a little like, what's the word? It feels not revolutionary, but it feels like I'm going against the grain to do whatever the hell it is that I want.
Yeah.
Which in my instance is like, I do get a lot of joy out of cooking and baking specifically for people. And if it's someone's birthday, bringing them a cake and that kind of thing. So, once I realized that I could kind of tap into my own power and forge my own path and not worry about how people necessarily perceived me according to those kinds of stereotypes, I was able to kind of just like tap into my own power. And when I did start, because I was always baking, I just like literally hid that part of myself when I went to work. Right. So when I realized like, hey, I can do whatever the hell I want, I'm a grown ass woman, like y'all aren't paying my bills, that was very freeing. And as far as like just like the cultural history, like in a wider American foodways landscape, I've always like, I feel like I've associated like baking and feeding people with women who were the ones doing most of the work. It hasn't been until like recent decades when like being a chef has come with the prestige and with the salary that we find, it's a lot of men who are the faces of in those positions. But like my grandmothers, for example, my mother, like my great aunts, that has been my personal experience with baking. Yeah. And the wider American landscape, I think, as far as like well-known like cultural icons and role models, I would say like, with baking, it has been limited, but that's only because we all know that the people who have done the work haven't been the ones to get the credit for it always. And so, there are people like in Louisiana, I'm from Louisiana, and everyone knows Leah Chase of Dookie and Chase, a restaurant, a really phenomenal, incredible woman who, really like came up, through the ranks of the like New Orleans restaurants before, she got married and joined the Dookie Chase family. And, just thinking about my own great grandmother's story, which was so similar and such a striking parallel, because she moved to my great grandmother, who is from Prairieville, which is this itsy bitsy town, like between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. She moved to Houston and was working in restaurants, which is incredible. And she like saved up money and moved to Louisiana and bought a house. And, these women, like most of them, we don't know their names. They haven't gotten credit for it. So to now be in a position where, there are, I would say there are more than a handful of us, not too many handfuls, but there are more than a handful of us now. And just knowing that, I know I am benefiting from so many sacrifices and so much work that so many other women have put in. So, in my book, it was important that I name the women who influenced me. So I talk a lot about my grandmothers, about the recipes that they taught me, and also just about who they were as people, and you know how they moved through our society, facing all types of discrimination, and how you know they still were full of joy and full of hope, and you know, very progressive in their thinking. Like it's just so, it's, to me, it's fascinating thinking back about, you know, the conversations I had with them growing up, and how, you know, judgment wasn't like a thing with them, you know. And so for me, yeah, that it was about the women who have had that specific impact on me, knowing they really just stand as placeholders,
Yeah,
for so many other women who came before me.
I love that. And you've got like beautiful, gorgeous like imagery in here of your family and your mom, and it's really clear how important those women have been to you in your life. And I love that. I mean, look, I think that when cookbooks, I always think, this is what I think about art in general. Actually, I'm just going to say it out loud. If you're not, if you as an artist, whether you're a chef, a writer, a painter, or a photographer, if you're not putting yourself into your work, so like that's where the magic is. It's like when your personal relationship with the subject and what you're talking about or writing about, if you're not in it, I think it's really, really difficult for anybody to connect with it. But sometimes I feel like, as a rule, historically, perhaps food writing has, and cookbooks maybe have had that distance, right?
Yeah.
I think as a culture, and I'm talking about Black people with a capital B, and the diaspora, of all the diasporas, not just the African diaspora, I think we generally do bring ourselves to it because identity has been such a cornerstone of our experience of the world, right? So we, like, you know, I just tweeted something the other day. I remembered that being 5 years old, right? And my dad's Black African, my mum's white Irish. And growing up as a kid being called half caste, and always feeling like an immigrant and feeling weird and other, and but also thinking, hang on, black and white, that makes grey. How come I'm not grey? You know, so even from like 5 years old, having this lens on myself that is kind of political and social justice lens, you know what I mean, all of this stuff, and with that feeds who we are, right? So we then can't help but bring ourselves to every conversation because we've been steeped in that conversation. Anyway, let's move on. That was a bit heavy and political. I know there's some questions in the Q&A, and I will come back to those momentarily, but I want to talk about Thanksgiving and the holidays because I'm a new American.
Welcome. Hey. Okay. Yes.
So yeah, let's talk about the holidays. And
Yes.
if people were going to jump into, like, what are some of the gorgeousnesses in your book that people might want to be pulling out the bag for Thanksgiving? Let's say, what other holidays are there?
I'm like, there's Thanksgiving, there's Christmas, there's Kwanzaa for those who celebrate, Hanukkah for those who celebrate, Mardi Gras.
Oh my God, these are all my favorite holidays. What am I talking about? I don't know what they are. Let's go. So what are people pulling out for Thanksgiving here?
Yeah.
Let's go one by one. Let's pick a recipe for each holiday. So Thanksgiving, tell me.
Love that. I have a whole chapter on like pies and tarts, and Thanksgiving, I think it's like it's pie time. And then I feel like Christmas is a little more cake time, cake and cookies. Thanksgiving is pie. So I would say, and these are like literally the recipes that like I've made for Thanksgiving that people like ask me to keep making. One of them is a bourbon pecan pie. It's really good. If we want to go allergen free, there is a there's an apple pie. I've got a sweet potato pie. My mom, she was always the person that made sweet potato pie. And I've got dinner rolls, which are like necessary. Like if you're going to go through the fuss of making a whole Thanksgiving meal, please make homemade dinner rolls. Like they will just like come on, like don't go buy the stuff from a pack at the store. If you're doing everything else, make the dinner rolls.
I
So
absolutely hear that. Okay, I'm down with dinner rolls. Talk to us more about the bourbon pecan pie.
yeah, so I mean, pecan pie, it's like it's really sweet in the sense that like this is one of the things I realized when I went to France. I was like, oh, desserts where I'm from are like really like they're a little bit more on the sweet side. I mean, I actually like don't like things that are really sweet. I want things to just kind of like hit me with flavor, not sugar. So the great thing about my bourbon pecan pie recipe is like by like roasting the pecans, you're really bringing out the bitter umami flavor in the pecans that balances that out. And by adding like a lot of bourbon, you're also balancing out that sweetness. And then I use pure cane syrup, which also just kind of provides, a more interesting like sweetener, because I would say traditionally people make it with like Karo corn syrup, which it's like if you ask a lot of people about their pecan pie recipe, it's like look on the back of the Karo bottle, because that's that's how a lot of people get recipes, which is great because I'm like whatever gets people in the kitchen cooking, baking, all for. But yeah, just like using like a less refined sweetener, I think it's really nice. So I love that recipe. Yeah.
Okay, so what would I be doing for Thanksgiving? I have had the pleasure of having Thanksgiving here at my mother-in-law's for a number of years, and sometimes I'm allowed to contribute. My mother-in-law is very specific about cooking and Thanksgiving. So what are the things I did last year to put some contributions on the table? I remember I made like a roast beef, like a rare roast beef using suya. Like, so suya is a seasoning blend from it's not just from my book, it exists in West Africa. And it's this lovely kind of smoky, peanutty, spicy gorgeousness. It works really, really super well on red meats in particular, but also on vegetables and things like that when you're roasting them. So I made a roast topside with like a very mild blend of suya, and then I did like an African peppercorn steak mix. So it had this crusted with cubeb and alligator pepper and grains of salem, and it was really like popping. And then I did that with like something from the book is called an osu ranch dressing. So just a ranch dressing, but using some grains of paradise, so you get floridity and citrus and like this really interesting other notes going on in there. So I remember doing that. And also I think I had these recipes for sweet potatoes in here, and I think we did that. And I did otto, mashed yam, which actually should be more of a New Year dish, honestly, but we'll get there. So yeah, it's more of like incorporating Ghanaian ingredients into Thanksgiving more than necessarily being like, I'm going to turn your Thanksgiving upside down, or like making everybody eat okra soup. All right, what's next in the row? Which comes first? Next is Hanukkah, right?
Yeah, but wait, I love what you said about like people get very ritualistic during Thanksgiving.
Right,
like
yeah.
People, it's like people get a little like possessive over the like Thanksgiving real estate, like what's taking up the real estate on the dining table. And that's actually, it's one of the things I love, because it's like, it's tradition and it's so important for people to like maintain their traditions, but also it's like really exciting when you can incorporate like new traditions in family. So I love that your mother-in-law was like, this is how we do it, but like you still were able to like bring a little Ghana kitchen to the Thanksgiving table.
Don't tell anybody, but everybody loved that beef.
I bet. I bet it tasted really good.
But actually, Hanukkah is another holiday we celebrate in this house because my wife is Jewish Italian, New York. So I've also had the experience of Hanukkah here. Some of the food is, I'm like, oh, why? Honestly, like, have you ever had gefilte fish?
I haven't.
I'm not sure. I'll have to give that a few more goes, I think. But it's an interesting one. But
The
Yeah.
baking is all good. The Hanukkah baking, I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
arugula, challah, give it all to me. It's delicious.
So tell me, so what are we baking for Hanukkah? Because maybe I can bring a contribution now to Hanukkah, because I didn't know what to do before. Go on.
I mean, like challah. So I have a challah recipe in my book. And like I've been in New York 10 years now, and you can't help but like be inspired by like all of the amazing cultures and food traditions there are here. And I actually I use challah as like the base of my king cake recipe because I love this recipe so much. But also like arugula, which isn't in my book, but is one of those like very first things I made when I like got deep into like blogging and was just trying to like explore things and make things that I didn't eat growing up. And arugula is like, it's fun to make. It's like so darn delicious. So I'm saying challah and arugula, like, yes.
Have you gone toe to toe with Jake Cohen on challah yet?
I have not, but what an idea. Maybe I would not dare challenge him, but maybe, I don't know, I might have to think of a way. Maybe I'll just show up at his place with some challah and be like, a gift for you.
I will send you some Kelly spice, and you should put Kelly spice into your challah and give it to him and to taste and be like, what do you think of that? There's some West African inspired challah for you, babes.
Look at that. I love that. I love that idea. I'll be like, Zoe made me do it if you don't like it.
The one thing that has definitely cut through in this household when it comes to ingredients from Ghana is that seasoning, Kelly seasoning, because America is, well, this, obsessed with pumpkin spice and like cinnamon. Like those two flavors dominate for like the last part of the year, I think. And my mother-in-law Debbie, I made her a batch of the Kelly seasoning, and now she puts that in literally everything she bakes, like everything. So whether it's a plantain or a banana bread to short crust pastry, like she loves it and she puts it in everything. So I'm going to suggest that if there's one recipe that you use all season from my book, it's going to be Kelly seasoning. I'm fighting for it to take over pumpkin spice.
I love that.
Okay, what's next? Is it Kwanzaa before Christmas?
No, it's Christmas and then Kwanzaa.
Sorry. New Year. So
yeah.
I mean, I'm all over Christmas because I'm British, but we do it differently. So tell me about your Christmas. Go on.
My family, honestly, we didn't have like any little kids until like 2 years ago. So we just got really chill. It was like Christmas was just like Thanksgiving part 2, which I loved because I'm like, give me the food, give me the family. I don't need the stress of gifts. But yeah, I feel like for Christmas, it's nice to have like a cake on the table, like something really like special, like showstopper-ish. And in my book, I have, it was actually one of the cakes I made on the Great American Baking Show. It's like a lemon cake with a cranberry and cream cheese filling. Actually, I did an orange variation, so orange and cranberries and cream cheese, and it's just so festive and delightful and beautiful. But I feel like any cake, like whatever, like bundt cakes are also just so festive and beautiful. Like add some sugared cranberries on top, and you've got something that's gonna just be really gorgeous on the table. And what about what about your New York family and your both sides of your family?
Christmas is another battle here because you do Thanksgiving in such a big way. Obviously, we don't do Thanksgiving in the UK. And so the times I've been here for Christmas, on Christmas Day here, there's usually like a big ham and like cold cuts, and it's more like a buffet style. And I'm like, well, where's the turkey? Where's the goose? I want all of that again. Like I need to have it.
Yes.
It's Christmas.
Yes.
So I'm going to fight for that this year because I want a bird on the table.
Yes.
But, back in the UK, I mean, an English Christmas dinner isn't a million miles away from a Thanksgiving dinner, right? You have a big bird, usually a turkey, sometimes a goose. You're going to have roast or mashed potatoes. We have parsnips, carrots, all of that glorious veg, Brussels, honeyed carrots, all of the good stuff. And I always make a shrimp cocktail, but also my prawn cocktail is different to American shrimp cocktail. So, but then, I always try to bring a bit of Ghana into it. So when I'm doing my Brussels, like we actually, we both had this, I think, at Kwame's, he did suya Brussels, and that's something I do for Christmas, is suya Brussels and things like that. So, and then maybe you'll have some jollof, because my dad likes to have some African food on the table, right? And maybe you'll have some otto, which is like this mashed, it's yam, not sweet potato, like actual yam, puna yam, mashed with either palm oil is traditionally how you would do it, but I have the recipe in my book uses turmeric, so you get that golden color without having to go and find palm oil and stuff. So things like that. And again, like, sometimes I've been known to roast a bird in jollof seasoning, so that it's just a more like a nice kind of aromatic, slightly spiced bird, rather than just a plain piece of chicken meat. And then I've got to mention spice cubeb, because I'm not a baker, but there are a few, and also there isn't a long lineage of desserts in Ghana either, honestly. So that was a real struggle for this cookbook, was coming up with desserts. But I have a really simple and easy spiced cubeb shortbread, which is great for Christmas because it has that very Christmassy aroma, and there's also like this kind of piney aroma from it because of the menthol and the eucalyptus. So it goes good. It's a good one for Christmas, I think. That's what you should be baking for Santa, mums out there, is the spiced cubeb shortbread. Okay, so then Kwanzaa, which I get to really experience as a holiday, because we don't have Kwanzaa so much in the UK. I only heard about that when I came to the States. So I was like, what? This is cool. So yeah, tell me about Kwanzaa.
I mean, honestly, like it's interesting. I feel like Kwanzaa in the US, it comes in waves, right? It's like a few years, like people are celebrating, and then it takes a lull. And it seemed like a couple of years ago, I hosted a Kwanzaa party a couple of years ago. Like it must have been 2019, because it was before the pandemic. And honestly, it was just like a chance to like invite friends over and kind of have, like have food. It's not nearly as much as Thanksgiving or Christmas. Although the last night of Kwanzaa, which is New Year's, you're supposed to have a big Kwanzaa feast. But it was honestly just a chance to like be with friends and just like set intentions and be intentional about the different principles of Kwanzaa, which are like unity, self-determination, those kinds of things. So yeah, I think we're like running into the new year. And do you have any New Year's traditions you want to share?
Up until recently, my New Year involved mostly getting drunk. So
that's champagne over here, just champagne.
I'm going to direct people to the cocktail section of my book, or the drink section. Again, not hugely expansive, but there are some real lovely treats in there. So like, just like making cocktails with new ingredients, right, and fun flavors. So things like, I have a good recipe for like sorrel or sobolo, so known as zobo in Nigeria, and known in different, like you call it red drink here. I think there's a derivative from that drink, but it's an hibiscus-based kind of cooler, and then mixing it and just using that with like gin cocktails and like vodka cocktails and things like that, or maybe baobab and ginger, putting that together into like a cocktail, or even a hot toddy, that kind of vibe. Ooh. So just about bringing in little aspects of West African flavors into your cocktails and being like fancy with the colors, because you get this.
I love that.
And yeah, and maybe making like little canapes with like chichinga, or like the skewered, like the JFC skewered chicken, things like that. I like making canapes, not for like thousands of people.
Have you done that before? Have you made them for thousands of people?
But I like canapes for like small parties and cocktails. That's fun.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to run out of time, so I think we should look at the Q&A box here.
Yeah. Do we have any questions?
This Kimberly Schwab says, love the conversation about authentic. There is some pressure to representing a cuisine to an audience that is unfamiliar, but there is also a concern that cuisine could be dumbed down or oversimplified to make it accessible. How did you address that in both of your work? Okay. I'm going to go first, I think, because I definitely had to wrestle with this a lot. So when the first edition of this book came out, as I said, it was a time when this was incredibly niche. There wasn't a cookbook like this in the UK yet, and people were still talking about African food, singular, not plural. There was still that Africa's not a country, and there was still so much educating to do from me to this audience, right? And then especially like the press and like managing how the press talked about it, and controlling the narrative, which is so hard to do but really important to do. And the biggest battle for me, or the biggest sacrifice I made with the first edition, was in having to like not include the first time around some of the ingredients that now feature in this version of the book. So they were always in the library as a reference, but in the first edition, I took them out of some of the recipes so that they didn't feel too, because of that accessibility question, right? There was some pressure on me to make it accessible. And so now those things have gone back in. But I don't feel like, even then, the first version, I don't feel like anything was watered down, but it did have some absentee ingredients, and they were like the core spices. So I'm really happy that I got to go back to the book and put those flavors back in, because they do make a difference. And then, as a caterer and stuff, it was a constant battle it was a battle for a while, because what would happen is, I'd have my menu, which was my menu, and then customers would come in, and you're dealing with two different types of palates and what they're used to, right? So in Brixton, for example, Ghanaians would come in and they might say it's not spicy enough, right? And then a white audience would come in and say it's too spicy, and it's like, how are you constantly, and for a minute, for like a year or so, and this is the pressure of hospitality and the gentrification of Brixton actually as well, like there's a lot of things going on at the same time. So increasingly more of my customers were a white audience, and so I had to temper it, because they were the people who were buying the food, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then it was like, and in certain clients, like corporate events or whatever, they'd want to have this West African food, but they'd be like, can you tone down the spice? So for private clients, it was always like, well, the client gets what the client wants, right?
Right.
And in Brixton, there was like this moment where it was very difficult for me, because I was trying to survive, but not necessarily capturing a high footfall of like, the diaspora where I was. And so having to please the audience a little bit that was there. But, you talked about this coming back into your own power, and it didn't last very long, but I really regret that, honestly. I think that's one of the mistakes I made, was doing that tempering for that moment, because once it's happened, people don't forget that that's, because, do you know what I mean? Like, people will then assume that that's how that food is all the time, right? But actually, I always created menus that suited the space and the audience it was going to be served in. So the street food menu looked different to the restaurant menu, and the restaurant menu would look different to a catering menu, because it was about who am I feeding and what do they need, right? But since then, I'm more like, F all that, right? It's more about how I want the food to be received and taste, and how I want you to experience it tasting. So there was that crisis of confidence probably for like a year, 18 months. And then I was like, fuck everybody, I'm doing what I want to do. And like, you either like it or you don't, So that took a minute to come back to, but that was about, having, regaining authority for what I was doing and pleasing myself, not an audience that might or might not turn up.
Right.
How about yourself? What was your experience with that?
I think at some point, I just had to like understand like everybody has different ways of making everything. Like the within group differences are greater than the out group differences. So yeah, I just had to ask myself, like, do I like this? Is this like true to like what I'm trying to do? And it's something, I still, like you said, I still am coming to terms with, and like the recipe contributions I do for different publications, because you are writing for different groups and different palettes and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's definitely just something that you have to balance. But with your own book, it's like, do you,
exactly.
boo?
Exactly.
Yes.
If it's your own book, it's like, I don't care. Here it is. Well, it's not that you don't care. I mean, I don't want to say that because I do care,
Right.
but also, through maturity, through growth and all of that, it's like, I want to have a different conversation with the people that use this book now almost. I want to be like, it's important that you do get to use these ingredients, because if you're looking for this authenticity, this is how you get there. I want to give them help. I want to give you substitutions, but I really would prefer that you use the ingredient, like I would. And for that reason, I read Nigella Lawson in conversation with Lisa Kennedy recently said something similar to this, which was, at least giving them more than one recipe or a handful of recipes to use an unusual ingredient. And like in this book, that's the case. Like, you're not going to find something that only crops up once. So, grains of same, grains of paradise, dao, they're going to feature throughout the book. Sometimes they'll be optional, but there'll be plenty of reasons for you to be able to use those ingredients. It's not just a one-off kind of situation. But yeah, it's about balance at the end of the day, and then also about doing you.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any more Q&A questions.
Well, there is one question. Actually, Zoe, what you were just saying, I think we'll kind of build on it. So Emily in the chat asked about, this is a different it's a different cover, a different sort of branding for this book. So I know it's a US edition, but it sounds like some of the content has changed a bit as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the new version?
Yeah, the cover has changed. So the first edition looks like, whoa, it's like this, and it has this, like, I really wanted the first edition to have, I wanted it actually to have a kente style fabric, which proved to be very expensive to do. So we didn't do that, but we did get a nice textured cover and like this, so it's very tactile and it's nice to hold and it's big and bright and yada yada.
Yeah.
But it didn't have my face on it.
And the patterns kind of, the patterns and textures have sort of stayed through the pages as well, which I think is great.
we kept all of that inside.
Yeah.
We wanted to keep that color and vibrancy, but the cover, I think they thought that for some reason they thought my face would probably sell the book more these days. And I think in the US, you're more used to authors having their face on the cover of books than people are necessarily in the UK. So I think that was the decision they made there. And I was a bit weird about it at first, but then I was like, fuck it.
It's great. Well, there's also this like, because I buy a lot, I love British books and we import a lot of books at Booklarder, and I just always laugh that like so often the UK editions of books will have like really graphic covers, and then when they get a US release, they've got to have food on the cover, and I love author faces on the cover. I'm not complaining, but I'm always like, do they just think we won't know it's a cookbook if there's not food there? Like we can't handle that there's just
I'm not sure.
Anyway, I don't know. But we get both of your gorgeous faces on your books, so I love that for sure.
But also, let me just add, sorry.
Oh, no, go for it.
I didn't fully answer your question.
Oh yeah, sorry. I cut you off.
The other big, more important change just in the cover is, as I think I did mention it briefly, but I want to reiterate that I did go back to this book, and there's over 70 of the recipes have been, rewritten through the lens of experience of doing things easier or better, and plus adding ingredients in that were missing before to give that more authenticity to it. But it does, I love both of these books, and they are both a labor of love. This is the biggest labor of love in the world, but also coming back to this, I didn't do it lightly. You know, I took a lot of time to put myself back into it from where I am now.
Yeah.
Which is a slightly different place, but with still the same enthusiasm and joy and passion. But yeah, that's that.
Great. No, it's great. And authors so rarely get the opportunity to do that. So it's lovely.
Yeah.
And Vallery, congratulations on your wonderful book as well.
Thank
I am
you.
so excited to bring new things to my holiday table this year. I'll get them both up here. I'm redoing my kitchen, so I probably am not making Thanksgiving this year, but I will make things at someone's house at some point. Thank you, both of you, for joining us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Like I said, we will post the video to our YouTube channel. Everyone will be notified, so you'll get to share it and watch it all again. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Good to see you,
Bye.
Vallery. Congrats. Speak
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, thank you.